Hi, it's Joy Foster, founder of Tech Pixies and the host of the Sparkle and Thrive podcast. And I have a very special guest with us today. Of course, I love interviewing Tech Pixies. We have the most amazing community at Tech Pixies. And one of the things that I absolutely love is that people within our community support each other. And Melanie came in through, I believe, our boot camp, our superhero boot camp, and then came into our social media accelerator program. And she is a weight loss and burnout coach. And of course, a lot of women that we work with at Tech Pixies are in that sort of perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal stage. And that's a place where a lot of that can happen, where you got a lot of weight gain and burnout is happening. And so having support for health and well-being is very important through that time period. We also know we have a lot of women who've just had babies in our community as well, and they're looking for flexible work. So there's also challenges that come with how do I manage, my day with a baby and trying to do everything and all the things. And of course, we are huge fans at Tech Pixies, not just of social media coaching and business coaching, but also life coaching. And one of the things we talk about at our vision workshop is your health and well-being. And of course, that's a really important quadrant in Melanie's life. And it's transformed her life. And now she's helping others to transform theirs. But also on that vision workshop and through some of the other things we've done, you've had some amazing things that have happened in your life. I'm hoping you're going to tell us a little bit about that.
Okay.
So Melanie, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here, and tell people where you are in the country and why and how you got into weight loss and burnout coaching.
Well, it's a good question. I'm in Canterbury, so that's East Kent, but I do actually work with people all over the world online. So I've worked with people in New Zealand, Spain, America, New York. So that's been really interesting, and seeing the different cultures and what effect that has on people. Yes, I'm very much into the concept of helping women with all kinds of issues, but primarily my background is weight loss. Because possibly I worked in the beauty industry for many, many years, beauty and spa and wellness industry, but I did have a big break. That's quite another story in a completely different field, but I have come back to it recently. I'm really a queen of burnouts because I've actually managed to get burnt out myself 3 times because I'm actually now 61, so I've had plenty of time to do it. But I'm feeling great and happy with myself, more than I've ever felt. And I have the energy of somebody in their 30s, which I'm really proud of now, despite having been really burnt out, almost to the point of not being able to move the last time. Because I think the problem we all have is, as you know, Joy, as a coach yourself, if you don't change your mindset, you repeat everything. So you will put yourself in a different environment, which you think will make everything wonderful, but you then repeat the same old behaviors, resulting in the same results. Would you not say that was true?
I totally agree with you. And actually, I was just having this conversation with a couple of people in various different capacities where I was saying to them, if you don't actually change the thinking or the, like you call it, the mindset, you can change jobs and you're just going to carry the same challenge into that other job. So it's really this concept of you have to change the inside before the outside changes. And a lot of people, it takes a while to understand that. Now this is really interesting. Before we get into a conversation around weight loss, let's first talk about burnout. I love how you said I'm the queen of burnout. I've burnt out 3 times. Like I've been there, done that. So the signs. Let's talk about what are the signs of burnout? When do you know it's coming, and why do people ignore those signs?
Do you know what? That's really interesting questions, because I think the problem is people don't know the signs of burnout. Otherwise, they wouldn't get burnt out. So often they'll wait till their body literally has stopped working, which may be your 3rd burnout, your 4th burnout, who knows, before you actually go for help. So that's a really good, interesting question. So from somebody who has suffered from these burnouts and now knows, for example, my daughter's, you're talking about people who've had babies. My daughter's 34 and I have a granddaughter, and I'm now able to pass on all that information to her. And she's also had a high-powered job in London. So yes, exactly. Trying to help her not to succumb to burnout. So I can treat people at both ends, really, those who've already gone through it, or help prevent burnout in younger people. So the signs of burnout usually show in your body. But the younger you are, the more you're able to put up with it.
That's really interesting. Yeah. And would make
and
sense.
You'll keep going. And the trauma happens in your body. I had amazing, well, with me, everything kept going wrong. And I never put it down to my mindset because I didn't know. Especially we're talking now quite a few years ago. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have the information. So you might find it might be fatigue, usually fatigue, stress, anxiety, depression. They're really all signs of what we call burnout. And you may get it in a different balance. You may be feeling more depressed, or you may be feeling really anxious. I would say particularly with younger people, that anxiety is one of the things. And by anxiety, I mean that worrying about everything. I think all young people at the moment are anxious. I have 3 adult children, and they've all experienced degrees of anxiety. So anxiety seems to be one of the biggest things in younger people. As people age and the menopause comes in, you've also got physical symptoms interacting. And if they haven't sorted it out while they're young, often that can be when things like depression get worse. And then it also shows up in your body. It can show up in your body at any age, particularly things like autoimmune disease. Mm-hmm. So we can go from things like eczema, underactive thyroid is a very, very common one, early menopause, skin conditions, eczema. And we all know that when you're feeling depressed or tired, those all will flare up. So those are the real warning signs that you're getting. And they can be very mild in the beginning, and then they can get worse and worse. So yes, I've had a few bits of things removed from my body. I've managed to reverse some of my autoimmune diseases. My asthma's completely gone. I can run now in my 60s, which I couldn't do in my 30s, 40s, and 50s. So I just want to give people hope that you can really change things, starting with that mindset. And in fact, your imagination is the first key to your success mechanism. I love that quote. And one of the things that I have a quote that I really use every day, and I look at every day, which is, I have to read it because I can't always remember it. My goal is to wake up every morning feeling overwhelmingly thankful about the kind of life I have created for myself. So as you know, Joy, that's what it is about, creating that life. But the trouble is we get sort of wound up on this. Well, it's a bit like the hamster wheel, isn't it? We have to pay the mortgage. We have to look after our children. What else? All these things that go on. We have to keep our partner happy. We have to keep everything going. But sometimes you just need to stop and look at your life again. Why do people put on weight? When anyone comes to see me about weight, the first thing I look at is what's going on in their life and what's gone in the past.
It's very interesting, the studies around weight.
Yes.
And things that might have happened to someone as a child and how that impacts their weight later on. I heard a really interesting study actually just this morning, because I use my mornings to go deeper in my study and to really, solidify what I'm learning so that I can, obviously teach it as well. But the learning that I had this morning was that there was a study done with cleaners, and 50% of the cleaners were told that the amount of physical activity that they were doing every day was the equivalent of, in America, they have the FDA. So the FDA recommended amount of exercise you needed to do. So all the heavy lifting, all the cleaning, they were generating the same amount that a regular person should be doing on a given day, exercise wise. The other 50% was not told that. They were told nothing about the fact that they were doing the FDA recommended amount of exercise. They weren't told that. So half the group was said, you're doing the recommended amount of exercise just in doing your job, and the other half wasn't told anything. A month later, the women who were told that they were doing the FDA recommended amount of exercise just by doing their job weighed less. They lost more weight. Their measurements came in, were lower. Their blood pressure was 10% lower. And it's this concept that actually, just by thinking that their job was a healthy job, that they were getting all the exercises all the exercise they needed just by doing their job, that had an impact on the actual their actual health was incredible. So I think this concept, and we teach it obviously Tech Pixies, but first in the mind, then in form. It's really getting clear on how you want to feel, particularly when it comes to health and well-being. It's not so much how do I want to look, it's how do I want to feel. And I think if you start to focus on how you want to feel, and you look at the activities that you're doing during your day, and you look at the choices that you're making, but really it's about how do I want to feel. You start there, and then the imagery comes and everything else. And that's that's been my experience with health and well-being. But I do know it is one of those areas that people can get really stuck on. And for you, that was a really big part of your life. I mean, you changed your entire life.
Absolutely, yeah.
What are some of the changes that you made, and why did they work for you?
Well, when I hit rock bottom, I got COVID right at the beginning. And I had been ill before that, but obviously because I wasn't very healthy. And I didn't know at the time I was also suffering from PTSD, but that's another story. And I'd been a yo-yo dieter, probably looking back now and starving myself, over-exercising, putting on weight, the whole shebang of a lot of women of my age group, in fact, who were sort of influenced by the 70s, the 80s. And also we saw our mothers saying things like, does my bum look big in this? Our mothers continually dieting. So if you have got daughters, please be careful not to do all these cleanses, say, my stomach's big, this, that, and the other, because that has a huge impact on a young girl's mind. And a lot of my clients, I use hypnosis. So we'll go back in time and I will literally hear all these stories. Yeah. So that's another thing to remember. If you have got daughters, please don't start putting that into their minds.
Melanie, I'll never forget it. I was walking down the street one day, and I had a younger girl. I mean, my daughter's now 13, so she's in that place where these words really matter. But this gal, there was a woman, and so at that time she was probably like 7 or 8. But the woman was walking with her daughter, and they were having an argument, and she looked at her daughter, and she was obviously clearly upset about something her daughter had said. And all I could hear was, well, if you think you look bad, what do you think I look like? And then she projected all of this, like, sort of, so the mother's self-image, she wasn't obviously her daughter was having a bit of a crisis of confidence with her own self-image. Yeah. But then when she was sharing that with her mother just projected her own self-image consciousness back on her daughter. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I knew enough about the brain to know that this was not a healthy conversation. Yes. And, that's one thing I know from the training that I've done is you can't outperform your self-image. So, Maxwell Maltz, he was a very famous surgeon, and he would do surgeries on people. Oh, you've got it. Powerful. There we go.
I'm reading that at the moment.
Yeah. So he would do these. He would do these operations on people, and they were still miserable. And
that's right.
What he learned is, I can change your face and make you look the way you want to look, but if you don't feel good on the inside, it's not going to matter. And that's when he started getting into all of this incredible work. So that's really cool that that's the book that you've got with you.
Yes.
So so you hit rock bottom, you had COVID, and then and what happened?
I had COVID, and then I had long COVID. So I never recovered. I had to sleep upright for 7 months.
Wow.
I couldn't move my neck. I could hardly move my body. I mean, I won't tell you the full story. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. I couldn't breathe. I didn't actually go into hospital because I was so scared, and it was in the beginning. Although a doctor said, I think you should. I said, no, I'm going to just do breathing exercises, But I did have nights where my children thought I would die. I thought I wouldn't wake up. And that really changes your life, because I know there's other people who've had COVID who were in that situation at the same time. It was really difficult time. And then to my horror, it just went on and on and on with everything going wrong in my body. It seemed to be on a weekly basis. I could never shake anything off. And then I realized that it was a time in my life where I either had to completely change my life or not. It was that sort of crossroads moment. It was the rock bottom time. So we had quite a big house, and I was actually looking after and fostering children as well at the time. And I'd been doing that for some time, but I had to make the really hard decision because of my health to just sell up and have a break. Didn't know what I was going to do, literally, which can happen sometimes. But to take that risk, there was the gut feeling telling me, you've got to do something or you're not going to be here for your children. And my children were worried, even though they're grown-up children. One of them was only 17, my youngest. So my husband and I, in a mad moment, just sold up and said, right, here we are, let's start again. What if we started life again like when we were young? I'm not even sure where it came from. We thought, what if we literally started from scratch and did everything right? And the first thing I did was sign up to Marissa Peer to do a lot of training with her, which I absolutely loved. And it really changed my life, helped me become a hypnotherapist, become a coach. And
I've heard her speak before. She is absolutely phenomenal.
She is. And I spent an amazing 5 days with her and some other ladies in London and made friends for life all over the world and did a lot of training. And I'm still doing ongoing training, you know, as you do, Joy. And as part of that, I had therapy myself. And then I was able to learn what had got wrong with me and analyze and put everything right. And I also re-looked at diet, although I have been in that industry before, and I completely tweaked my diet, because as women, we've been told to eat the wrong food for years, as you know, probably as well, Joy.
I'm learning. You know, I interviewed Julia Chara-Cuts on our podcast. She's a menopause nutritionist.
Okay.
And, you know, that was her point, is like everything that's worked for you up until now just stops working once you hit menopause and you have to reevaluate your food. And,
you do, because your body actually changes and your hormones changes and has an effect on the way you use protein. You have to put far more protein in your diet. So I did all the dietary changes as well. And the combination of the two and the mindset, particularly it wouldn't have happened without the mindset, because if you haven't got the mindset or the will to do it, it doesn't work. And that's what I find with my clients is putting the will back into their mind. It's almost as though if you came to me, what I would do is, let's imagine you as a person who had the most perfect childhood. You ate the right food all your life. What would you look like? Who would you be? And that's something that people have to really think about. It's quite hard for people, because I think people have
no one got a perfect childhood.
Exactly. Nobody has. But what would you be if you had? How would it be? How would it change you? It's a really interesting exercise to do.
Yeah, if you had a trauma-free childhood, and you had a healthy exposure to food and exercise your whole life, what would your life be like? Yeah. And really, we're talking, I think there isn't, you know, I think now we know so much more about trauma. There's hardly anyone who's escaped a level of trauma. I mean, some people have had more trauma than others. But sure. That for sure impacts. It has a huge impact on our health. You know, what we've gone through as a child, and a lot of what we've gone through as a child, we had no choice over. And that's what, until you then get into a place where you start to recognize, hang on, I'm in charge of me and my thoughts and my actions. But so many people, you know, 99% of the population really does live by default and not by design. And they don't do the things that we're discussing here, which is, you know, even think about that. You know, what if I did have this trauma-free childhood where I ate healthily? And, you know, I mean, one of the things that I think my kids have been very, very, very blessed with is that they have, for the most part, had a very trauma-free childhood if compared to what mine was like. And also that my husband is an Olympic gold medalist. He's a nutritionist he's been trained in sports nutrition, etc. And we, for their whole lives. In fact, I think being married to him was one of the best things that happened to me from a nutritional standpoint, because I was not great at feeding myself. I was lucky that at the university I was in, that they provided the food while I was there. And I was lucky, obviously living in my own home, my mom made food, but, and then when I was at the Olympic Training Center, I was fed really well. But as soon as I left the Olympic Training Center, I really didn't know how to cook, and I didn't know what to feed myself, and I wasn't very good at it. So I sort of lived off Cliff Bars. I don't know if you know what Cliff Bars are, but I sort of lived off Cliff Bars, literally breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I had all sorts of problems that started kicking in because I wasn't eating food properly. And when we got married, he just introduced this whole world to me of like potatoes. I mean, Americans don't really eat potatoes, but potatoes and a balanced diet and the colors of the rainbow and all, making sure that you've got all. So I think, and then when the kids came around, I made all their baby food. I didn't buy any baby food. I made it all, carrots, lentils, peas, everything. And that also changed my perspective too, because I was now feeding little humans. And so, but I do look at the last 15 years of my life, and I think I'm really lucky I married someone who understood nutrition, because I think I'm way healthier than I would have been just by the mere fact that I'm with someone that understands and makes an effort to bring in a really balanced diet into our home. And I don't think our kids fully understand the gift they've been given their whole life of having that sort of balanced diet. But it's a beautiful thing to think, if I had a trauma-free childhood and perfect food and nutrition, what would my life look like? What would it be like?
What would you look like? What would you feel like? And it's quite interesting because I did study nutrition a long, long time ago. And I was very good with my family. I cooked loads of food. And ironically, one of my children is a top chef. Really top chef. One worked in fashion and one is a dancer and singer. So all eat very well and all very sporty. My husband's also an ex-sportsman, actually, like yours, not Olympic, but rugby. But ironically, because of my blueprint, I starved myself a lot of the time, just ate starch, just ate lentils and beans and no protein. So because I'd been told, and particularly that was sort of triggered even more when I studied beauty, to not eat meat, to not eat things, to not eat a lot of protein, to always. So ironically, I was feeding everyone else, but I starved my own body.
That's interesting.
So it's quite interesting because I had such a blueprint. My mother was never happy with her body. And it was so put in that even though I knew what was right to do for others, I didn't do it for myself. So
really important piece of coaching there, I think, for women in particular, especially women who have babies and children. Your body obviously changes dramatically. I was sort of making a joke. I was in the boat the other day with the girls, and I'd gone into the coxing seat, which is where you sit. I'm normally the coach, but we were one girl short. So I said, okay, I'll jump in and cox. I actually don't fit in the cox seat because I've got, wider hips. And I was sort of joking, saying, well, I'm two babies later and I don't quite fit in here the way I used to. But and we do have to be careful about what we say. One of the things I noticed that when I started coaching women in particular, especially after having children, there's a certain amount of weight that you might gain and you don't lose that weight. But it's actually the way that we subtly speak to ourselves when we walk past the mirror every day. And that's whether you've had children or not had children. And it's when you start walking by the mirror and you start picking up all the things you don't like. And actually, I wouldn't be surprised if it was Marissa or somebody else where I heard them speak and they were talking about that. And they were saying, the next time you walk past the mirror, just pay attention to what you say to yourself. And I realized there were certain things I was saying to myself subconsciously when I walked past the mirror. And I've obviously shifted that, because last night I was walking to the door to shut the door, and there was like a silhouette, as there is at night. And I was like, oh, my butt looks good in those pants. And I was like, oh, my new subconscious thought is taking over. And so, the thing is that I think there's real power in looking at ourselves and talking about what we love. And being open about that with our kids, and also telling them what we love about them, and really, but in a way that's really uplifting, and I've always said to my children, you're so strong and healthy, and that's something that was important for me to get across to them, that they're strong and healthy, you're strong and healthy. So I think the language we use around ourselves and around our children is really important. So when you had this, so you had long COVID, you had everything was starting to fall apart. Yeah. So you got some coaching, you got some training. And then once you got that coaching and you saw it changing for you, you then became a coach and started using the techniques that were working for you.
Yes. And I've sort of developed my own way as well, as every coach does. You take things from, and I know I'm a great fan of Mary Morrissey, which I know you are. And I've got to thank you, Joy, for kind of putting me onto her. So thank you so much for that. Bob Proctor. And I kind of put my own things together with my own experience. And I'm finding it's working really well with my clients. Why I came to you, Joy, was because obviously I'm not very techie. I'm about to become techie, and I'm not scared of it anymore. So far, most of my clients have been word of mouth, which has been great. But I will be launching myself Tech Pixies style very soon. It's very exciting. But life is good for me, and I would say I'm happy. And even my hairdresser said the other day, "You're so happy." I've had him for a few years. I mean, really, most women's problems, in fact, talking about weight, a lot of weight is because women are unhappy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or it's just a symptom, and it's another symptom of something not working in the body properly. But having said that, I have clients that come to me that say, well, if I can be really, if only I was slim, if only I was tall and slim, if only I looked like a model. And I have to remind them that there are plenty of very slim people who are very unhappy. And this is a little story I could share with you. I've recently moved, as you know, Joy, and I've moved into a lovely house. Very quiet place, except we heard a lot of screaming like someone was being murdered. And my youngest son was staying with us, and he came down, what on earth is that? And I thought, well, it's obviously somebody with mental health issues or a problem. And we looked out and we saw another neighbor came out and obviously knew them. I didn't know the story, but then we also found this lady in our garden the other day trying to feed cats, which we haven't got a cat, except when I look after my daughter's cat. So, and I sort of spoke to her, well, who are you? And she was very strange, very odd, walked off. And my husband said, oh, that poor old lady. And I said, you know what? I don't think that's a poor old lady. And when she spoke to me, she had an upper class accent. Got the story. This is actually a former It girl and top model who's unfortunately is so destroyed with her mental health. But it's just, that was a real boof in my face, a reminder. And I've got that story now to tell my clients. And obviously I'm not going to say who it is because she's a well-known person. But when you, the trouble is, and this is the problem with people who go on crash diets, who have the gastric band fitted, they haven't changed their mindset. So when they become slim, they're really happy. That's that honeymoon period for a while. But then their mindset is still that they're unhappy. So they put the weight back on, or they're still not happy. They're still depressed. They're still on antidepressants. So when I work with people, it's really important that I get their mindset straight first. And even if that takes a longer time before they can lose the weight, once that light bulb moment goes on and they suddenly realize, it's a bit like the money mind shift, once that boof goes on, which I had with a client yesterday, and she said, it's happened. It's gone on. I get it now. I look back and I think, why was I eating that? Why was I doing that? What was wrong with me? I said, yes, because you've had that light bulb moment and you will never go back. So it's about having that happiness. And she said, I came to you for weight, but in fact, we've done everything. You've cured me of everything. And this was a lady who on the face of it had everything. She was well off. She had 3 homes. She has 3 homes. She's very intelligent and yet unhappy, and her weight was the symptom of that. And people aren't lazy who are overweight. There's all kinds of reasons why people are overweight. It's nothing to do with being lazy.
No, I would agree. I would 100% agree with that. And I think that's a really important message for people to hear, because so much of what's going on has to do with what's happening in the brain. Yeah. And what's happening, how much control how much control someone has over their thinking. And it is a muscle. You don't just suddenly have control over your thinking. You have to learn to control your thinking. And then it's a muscle. You got to lift weights every day. You got to change perspectives every day, all the time. And even, it's really interesting because just I've had 2 run-ins with the same woman. I've got a new puppy who's like 5 months old, and I've had sort of the same run-ins with her when I go for a walk. 2 different women, one woman who runs and she's scared of dogs, and another one who rides a bike and she's scared of dogs. And my dog's not tiny, but she's getting bigger every time, and she's got a bark on her, which is a little bit scary if you're not used to a dog or don't like dogs or are scared of dogs. So I'm consciously aware of these 2 women and how they feel. But what I also find really interesting is they have an energy about them, which is, I am scared of dogs. I am petrified of dogs. And so what's really interesting is my dog only reacts to them. She doesn't react to every single person that comes by us. She has a reaction. It's almost like she energetically knows this person's scared of me, and then she reacts. And of course, we know how we all react when we're scared. We all react in a not so nice way. And so it's been really interesting. But what it's done for me is I can't change how that person feels about a dog, unless they spend time with the dog and they want to spend time with the dog, which I don't think they do. I'm not going to change their perception. But what I can do is what it's made me realize is, what do I think about that person? How do I think about that person before I see them, while I see them, after I see them? And so when I see them now, I'm reflecting on, okay, what can I do to make their experience better? Where did I make a mistake? What can I change? But then I'm also, it's more importantly, like, how do I not be angry at this other person for their reaction to my dog, right? And so I think as we start to recognize that people are run subconsciously 99% of the time, most people are run subconsciously. Most people aren't consciously changing their subconscious like we do here at Tech Pixies, like you do with your clients. It's hard work. It's really hard work. Your brain doesn't like to change. No. It gets aggravated when you try to change it. It does not, kicks up a fuss. It's not a happy camper when you say, I don't want you to think that way anymore. I want you to think this way. You got to practice it. You got to train it. You got to work with it. It is literally the last frontier of our bodies that we do not know that much about. However, what we do know about it is if we can learn to train it, we can learn to change it. We can completely change the experience that we're in, not just for ourselves, but for other people. But noticing what we're noticing. What am I thinking? And like you said, weight is a symptom. Burnout, these signs of, being tired and overtired and, depressed and anxiety. These are all signs and symptoms that we have to wake up to and say, why am I feeling this way? Where is this coming from? Most people don't do that. Most people don't dig deeper and ask those questions. They think it's their fault. They think it's, and then they beat themselves up, which makes it worse.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting about the dogs, because I'm a dog owner as well. And you've probably seen it. Sometimes you approach somebody with a dog who hasn't got a dog. They've got a small child with them. And you can see the parent scoop up the child and go into fear and do this. And my husband and I go, right, that child is now going to grow up with the fear of dogs like their mother did, like their mother before them. And it sort of carries on through the generations. So if you think about that, about depression, about anxiety, about weight, it often carries on through the generations, particularly things, as you know, before the age of 7. So that's a real eye-opener. And yes, you can tell a lot about people from the way they are with their dogs, actually, because the dogs often have the same personality as well.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, that's a whole nother podcast conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So we've talked about the signs of burnout. We've talked about the power shift that we have to make with the mindset, and how coaching and it can really help with that. We've talked about how nutrition really matters for women, especially as they get older, because their body doesn't respond the same way to the food that it used to respond to. And there's certain foods that you need more of. Any other top tips that you want to leave people with? One of the reasons I wanted to bring you on to the podcast was because I have seen the work that you're doing with some of the people that are in our community, and it's been really positive experience for them. And I think, this concept of hypnotherapy is really, really interesting. And you're doing that with people. I think we really nailed it in terms of understanding that if you have extra weight, that's a symptom potentially of something else. And getting to the bottom of that, it might not be as simple as just go work out more.
No,
It's really more about what's the root of this issue, what's causing it, how do we change and work with the mindset, how do we then also introduce nutrition and other things. But any other things that you might want to pass on to someone when it comes to dealing with weight loss and burnout?
Yeah, I would say the one thing we haven't touched is, we mentioned it briefly, is exercise. I mean, I'm an outdoor fitness coach, but obviously I couldn't take people out when I'm seeing them online, but I can give them information. Is always to start small, start where you can, and always make sure, and I will go through that with people. But also just introducing movement into your life. But exercise is only actually 15% of weight loss, contributes only 15%.
15, like 15.
Yes. So when people think, well, I'll just work out harder, it's not going to work. Your food has to come first, mindset first. But if you're in the right mindset, if I can give you, or somebody like me, give you the right mindset to organize your day, because I think you mentioned it in the beginning, how do you organize your day? Because some people have children coming out the ears, they're running with the children, they're holding down an executive job. We all know people like that and think, how on earth do they do it? But that's because they've been lucky enough maybe to have that put into their mind by their parents, just like you were with your children. So if you haven't had that, it's a bit of an effort, but you can do it. But it is, again, it's all about mindset. But one thing I would say that especially women who've gone through menopause really need to think about long-term is their body. Or if you're younger, I wish I'd known this now, is to keep your body in tip-top shape, particularly with really good stretching. Because really good stretching, such as resistance stretching, you might want to look that up, can prevent you from needing to have new hips, can prevent you from, your neck problems. I mean, I really have the mobility of a very young person now, and I have the gait. I didn't before. I have the gait of a young person, and I absolutely revel in it. And I revel with being strong. So really, when you're thinking about weight loss, don't really think about weight loss. Think about being the strongest body you can have, being the strongest you, so that you can go forward. As a secondary gain from that, you will be the shape you were supposed to be. And that
I love that. I love that. Think about being strong.
Yeah, think about having the strength, to go forward and to prevent falls. People fall over. And I think I read something horrifying, like 65% of women of a certain age who fall and go into hospital don't come out.
Wow.
So, and I can remember a few years ago when I was constantly trudging to the physiotherapist, she kept saying things like that to me, but it didn't actually get in. She needed to hypnotize me. She said, make yourself strong, be the strongest you can be. And I look back and I go, I wish I'd clicked before, but it didn't, because I couldn't see the wood from the trees because I was in such an anxiety, brain fog.
And here's what I love about you coming onto the podcast and sharing your story. I think it's important for people to hear a weight loss coach, a burnout coach. They've dealt with these issues themselves. They've gone through the ringer with burnout. They've gone through the ringer with, like you said, the starving yourself and the weight loss and the issues with all that. So I think it's important, I always, when someone's had lived experience and they've come out the other side and they've got that story to tell, and they've really studied it and tried to get down and understand what's going on. These people in our lives, like Melanie, they are real gems. So I really appreciate you coming on. I hope that someone listens to this, and if they need the support that you can provide, obviously, I would love for them to connect with you. Now, you haven't yet launched yourself in the Tech Pixie style, as you way.
No, it's coming.
It's coming. But until then, how can someone find you? What's the best way?
They can either contact you. I can give you some details, Joy, and I do have a LinkedIn site which I was desperate trying to update yesterday, which is Melanie Lee, and put in burnout and coach. But I could send you some details, Joy. I'm really sorry. I did warn you, Joy. I said I'm just not there.
That's all right. We'll put your details in the show notes. But do you have an email that people can reach you at?
Yes, sure. It's melanieleetherapy@gmail.com.
Perfect. Okay. melanieleetherapy@gmail.com. If you'd like to connect with Melanie. I'm so grateful for you to come on the podcast. And I think, we really touched on 3 keys here. One is it starts with the way that you think. And I think that there's real merit in understanding that. And it may take some people longer than others to get that to click. But once it clicks, it makes a huge difference. Then number 2 is nutrition, and also being able to sort of generate that feeling of what you would like to feel like. And then number 3, like you said, 15%, it's exercise. It's really the smallest part. It's really mindset, nutrition, and mindset is the biggest piece, because you got to work through all the stuff. So that's where I think you've got a real talent and a gift. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for helping us to identify some signs of burnout, and also to identify that weight gain can be a symptom, and other issues in our bodies can be symptoms. And that actually those are times to start looking into what's underlying the symptom and go to that next point. All right. Well, thank you, Melanie. And of course, if you want to reach out to Melanie, we would encourage you to do that.
Yeah, I'd
And
love to hear from anybody. Yep. And I'm hoping to get a group together, Joy, so that I can have a support group for my clients and everything. So watch this space, basically.
watch this space. Brilliant. All right. Well, I'm so grateful that Melanie came onto the podcast. We love to hear from you. So if there is something you'd like us to talk about on the podcast, please do email support@techpixies.com. We've got some amazing series on women's health that we know people are absolutely loving, and we want to do more of that. If you know someone that you really respect and would be a great podcast guest, we'd love that introduction. I'm very, very picky about who comes onto the podcast. So we want to make sure that we only bring on people who have really helped change and transform lives. Of course, we also talk about social media and business coaching, life coaching, neuro coaching, and women's issues. And one of my favorite things, which is financial independence, which I very much believe in and am an advocate for, especially with women. So again, if you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it on social media. Please feel free to drop us a line, support@techpixies.com. Let us know what you'd like to see more of, less of, and also what your key takeaways were. I always appreciate reading that feedback, and I read every single thing. And of course, if you're interested in social media coaching or in life coaching or in business coaching, we have a new application form. So if you go to techpixies.com/coaching application, techpixies.com/coaching application, you can now apply to get coaching in any of those 3 areas. And someone personally from my team, myself or someone personally from my team, will reach out to you and talk to you about the options. We just need to know a little bit more about you and where you are on your journey in order to point you in the right direction. So if you're interested in finding out more about Tech Pixies and how we can work with you, how we can help you get your confidence digitally or otherwise, go to techpixies.com/coaching application. Reach out to us at support@techpixies.com. We'd love to connect. Thanks and have a great day.